internet and the environment. So here I just briefly wanted to highlight something about the internet and the web and also computer use more generally. And that is the material nature of the internet and the web. I always sense a kind of misunderstanding about the internet, the web, computers, and applications. And I think the way people talk about these technologies is that if they are abstract, if they are like a thought, like they live in a cloud, right? We talk about the cloud computing, internet, and just information floating in the air. But these are material technologies. The internet are connected by cables all over, not all over the ocean, but there's lots of cables in the ocean. You can kind of see the main ones here, connecting the United States to Europe from the Atlantic side, also in the Pacific. These are actual cables laid out in the entire ocean, because the information is not being sent over Wi-Fi. You know, the information from the US that goes to Europe, so on. This is not Wi-Fi. Wireless technology would be really inefficient. Okay, it's possible because you can send it through satellites, and some information is indeed sent this way, but it's very inefficient. So it's much faster if you have cables, fiber optic cables, and that's why there are so many cables laid out under the ocean connecting all the major hubs of communication in the world. The data centers themselves, right? We have some images here of Google data centers. These are infrastructure. These are material infrastructure that power the web and the search engines and all of computer work. And as such, of course, they create energy, they use energy, and they create emissions, and they create a carbon footprint. And there's an interesting site here by kind of artist research calculating how much it takes, how much carbon emissions are created when you actually use a Google search. Now, of course, the carbon emissions, the CO2 emissions of a particular technology depends on the kind of energy source that the technology is running on. So if you're running your electricity on coal, you're going to emit much more carbon dioxide than if you're running it on wind power. So these here are kind of estimates to kind of give an idea, but it's fairly understood that there are emissions from Google searches, from using your computer, from just clicking all around. You're using more and more electricity. The more you click, the more pages you go to, the more electricity you use, and probably is more CO2 you use as well. There's quite a lot of research out there. Google, of course, is concerned about climate emissions, CO2 emissions rather, and the climate impact of CO2 emissions. But we still go on. So in processing 3.5 billion searches a day, the world's most popular website, that is Google, accounts for about 40% of the internet's carbon footprint, which is kind of huge. One estimate from British environmental consultancy carbon footprint puts it between 1 gram and 10 grams of CO2 per Google search. So just going to Google and searching, you are emitting 1 and 10 grams. So this is a big margin. And Google at one time said it's more like 0.2. And then somebody said, no, it's more like 2, and so on. So let's say even if it's just 1 gram, that adds up. If you have 3.5 billion searches a day, that's 3.5 billion grams. That's a lot of tons of CO2 emitted per day just from people searching. And imagine how many searches are just completely useless. It's just people putting things there. You know, people don't think about the best way to do a search and minimize searches. I certainly don't, truthfully. So it seems like insignificant. It seems like it's all abstract and all living in the air. But it's real electricity that we are using, and it kind of adds up when everybody else uses it. Now, there are trends to make websites and applications more sustainable. Sometimes these are called green ICTs, information and communication technologies, or digital sustainability or sustainable computing. And this is, there's some websites out there talking about how you can reduce the footprint of your own website. Some websites are very heavy. There's lots of images, there's lots of videos, there's lots of colors and different fonts and so on. That requires energy. So that's less, the more stuff you have, it's probably less efficient and so on. There's some estimates out there. ICT currently contributes about 4% of global greenhouse gas emissions. Now, this is information and communication technology in general, which is twice as much as the aviation industry, according to the SHIFT project. So you have to be a little bit skeptical. You have to do your own research to see how well this relates to reality. But it's certainly a serious concern, because computers run on electricity. And the search, when you send signals to your Wi-Fi, to your internet, for the Google to run a search, they are also running electricity to run the search. And your computer is also running electricity and so on. So I think that's important for us to remember in the context of climate change and global warming. There was an interesting website here, website carbon calculator. You go to it. How is your website impacting the planet? You just put your web page URL, press calculate, takes a few seconds, and then they go and they tell you how much cleaner or not your web page is compared to other web pages tested. Now, once again, you have to look at the details. How are they calculating this? Is this accurate? How do I know which web pages have been tested? So it's kind of a little bit, not really sure how much value this provides, but at least you can kind of see that people are looking into this issue, and that may be relevant. Next time, we're going to be talking about social media in organizations.